Are you ready to navigate the new way to work? Forbes Books presents Dare to Care in the Workplace with Kathleen Quinn Botaw. Here's Kathleen.
My guest this week is Dr. Carol Swain. Carol has been a professor and author of award-winning books and articles relevant to understanding our culture. Carol's remarkable career in academia includes several advanced degrees, including the Master's in Law from Yale and a doctorate in political science from the University of North Carolina. She is also the founder of Unity Training Solutions, which was launched to provide alternative DEI training for corporations, churches, and schools. Carol, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's going to be a great discussion. And before we jump into all your brilliant work, and especially your work at Unity Training, can we step back for a minute and tell me about your journey to this point?
Well, first of all, I can say that I am one of those persons who feels like they've lived several lives in one lifetime. I was born in southwestern Virginia. I was one of 12 children. We all dropped out of school after completing the 8th grade. I married at age 16, had my first child at age 17, and by the time I was 21, I had 3 small children. And people came into my life and encouraged me. I got a high school equivalency in 1975. I started a community college in 1976 and earned the first of 5 college and university degrees. And I never consciously ever thought I'd want to become a university professor because I had a lifetime of shyness. But people came into my life and circumstances and steered me in that direction. And I ended up going to Princeton, getting early tenure, having my first book win national prizes. It was cited by the U.S. Supreme Court. And so I was tenured early. It normally takes 7 years. I did it in 3. And then I was hired by Vanderbilt University in Nashville, where I now live, and promoted to a full professorship. And along the way, I had a Christian conversion experience that put my life into perspective, but it also freed me from my shyness, and I've been talking ever since.
Well, we thank you for talking ever since. As a fan of yours, I'm glad you found your voice. And you believe that education, which was so amazing in your life, could improve much of what is wrong in our country now. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, I can tell you that I went to school in the 1960s. And during that time, the country was, very patriotic. We did the Pledge of Allegiance each day. And I grew up believing that I lived in the greatest country in the world. And I knew I was an American. And I watched the civil rights movement unfold before my eyes on television. And there was lots of optimism. And I believed in the American dream. I still do. And my own life experiences have led me to believe that your attitude and what you believe about the world is far more important in your life's outcomes than your race, your sex, I would say sexual orientation, any of those things. Your attitude and what you believe will determine how far you go. And I believe that if I worked hard enough, I could overcome the circumstances of my birth, meaning I could get out of poverty, I could live the American dream. And I also did not have anyone around me, even though we were dirt poor. We were poorer than all the other blacks around us. My mother never encouraged her children to blame other people for our circumstances or even to take handouts. Now, she would later get welfare and sort of become part of the system. But when I was a child, my mother had that strong Protestant work ethic. We didn't take handouts. So I grew up with a can-do attitude, but also I have benefited from having mentors. And I've always gravitated towards older people. And so there were people that came in my life that steered me in the direction that culminated with my becoming a very successful university professor. And the overwhelming majority of those people were white. Many of them were men. Some of them were, for the most part, conservatives. that was a factor in my success. And I never believed that I had to have a role model that looked like me in order for me to achieve something. And so the mentors I had did not look like me. They told me what I needed to do to be successful in political science, and I followed their advice. And at the time, the advice included that I needed to go to conferences, I needed to give conference papers, I needed to come up with original ideas, and that was easy for me. Like, I've always been creative, more artsy. In fact, I thought I was going to be a commercial artist. Life took me in a different direction, but I have art talent. And so I am who I am, but that journey has taken me down so many paths. And when I think about the different lives I've lived, I've lived that life of poverty in rural Virginia around other poor people. I've lived the life in academia where I was first a student, and then I got those degrees, and then I became a professor. And then later I had a Christian conversion experience. And so that all of those things have come together to make me who I am today, but that's a part of my life. And it also affects how I see race relations and what I believe is most beneficial for America at this point in its history.
And it sounds like your mother was one of your early mentors.
But you know something, my mother was an alcoholic. She would never have made Mother of the Year, and I only connected with her. She lives with me now. She's in her 90s. She came to live with me about 10 years ago. And
nice.
During that time that she has been living with me, I really came to understand my mother, to understand her life, and to love her in a way that I couldn't as a child because I didn't understand her. I spent a lot of my time trying to figure her out. And then once she came to live with me, I could see, her journey. And my mother is very intelligent. She could have easily have gone to college. She didn't and couldn't. But part of that had to do with the fact that she had polio. And she was not able to walk up the steps of the high school. So she dropped out of high school. But her intellect and my grandmother, I have benefited from being around people in my family who were very smart. They were not necessarily educated, but they were very intelligent.
Mm-hmm. My mother, too. My mother, if she had gone to college, could have done great things. And she's 87 years old. So we share that in common as well. You talk about other mentors and having many mentors in your life. Who is your most remarkable mentor?
Right now, I would say it's Bob Woodson of the Woodson Center in Washington. And I met Bob about 30 years ago. During the time I was on the faculty at Princeton, I was teaching a course in the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Policy, and I invited him to speak at the school about poverty. And that's how I first met him, and off and on we stayed in contact. After Bob founded a group called 1776 Unites, and he invited me to be a part of that group, and so we sort of reacquainted ourselves. But I have always admired him, and to me, he's like a national treasure, a walking encyclopedia, an elderly statesman, gentle, witty, intelligent, all of those things.
I would agree. I've seen him speak quite a bit, and maybe I'll get him on our podcast next.
It would be
He's a wonderful
great.
Man. I do agree with you. So, on your website, underneath your name, there's a line that says, "Restoring Hope in the American Dream." Why is that so important to you?
Because I want other people to experience America as I experienced it. I came from dirt poor. And I can tell you that at the time that I was being elevated in the sense that, I was getting into universities, I was being hired by Princeton and given a signing bonus, I was not a person of deep faith. I mean, I was an agnostic, one God, many paths, all of those kinds of things. That was me. When I look at the America that I grew up in that gave me so much hope, and the civil rights movement, that moment in history when whites and blacks and people of different religions, they locked arms and they decided what kind of America we're going to have. To me, that was such a turning point. It gave me and other Black Americans such hope And now I see an America that cuts off opportunities, I think, not just for blacks, and I think for whites and for everyone. And I would like to see us all to be able to realize the American dream. And I'm very concerned about messages that are being sent to our young people, all of our young people. This cuts across race and ethnicity, that are destructive messages about our nation and also about opportunities. And I'm afraid that if I had heard the messages that we send young minorities today, I'm not sure there would be a Carol Swain story. I'm not sure that I would have worked as hard as I did. I worked because I thought I expected a return. And if I believed that the world was stacked against me because of my race or because of my poverty, I'm not so sure I would have gone out and accomplished the same things. And I say that even believing that in destiny and in life's journey, there are some people that are called to be out there and to lead. And when I think about my childhood, I can think that I was a person who was very, very serious. And I always felt like there was something I was supposed to do. I always had that uneasy tension that I was supposed to do something. And when I look at America today, being silent is not an option. I'm officially retired, but I'm not anywhere near retired. I'm busier now than I've ever been. But being silent at this moment, that's not an option. I'm not wired to be silent when I feel like my nation needs me and people are crying out for help and that there are things that I can do.
Oh, thank goodness your retirement is brilliant. It's the new definition of retirement. Stand up and be heard. And that's one of the things I admire so much about you. What would you tell others, and especially women, how do they find their voice and the courage to fight back, to be heard, to say their truth and share their truth?
But you know something, there's a turning point that you reach. It's going to be different for each person. Mm-hmm. And for some of the women, there's groups out there now of moms who have never been interested in being involved in anything that looked like politics, and they still don't like politics, and they don't see what they're doing as politics at all, but they are out there fighting for their children and fighting for their children's future. They didn't know that was going to happen. And sometimes, I will meet elected officials or someone that's serving in a particular office, or maybe they started an organization, but it will be something that happens that is a turning point for that person. And for me, the life that I live now is beyond anything I could fathom in my imagination. I sort of feel like Martin Luther when he says, "Here I stand, I can do no other," but I was crippled by shyness. And this was after I was a university professor. I would try to write out everything I was going to say. Mm-hmm. And if I was going to talk, I would be clutching the lectern, and I was just paralyzed with fear. If someone asked me my name, sometimes I would get so nervous that I would forget my name almost literally. And I would say that my Christian conversion experience that I had 1999, 2000, but it was a culmination of a journey that took me through New Age and Eastern religions. And I was always a serious seeker, agnostic, but knew that there was something out there bigger than me, not sure what it was. But that culmination of that journey, when I had a born-again Christian conversion, it was like I was freed instantly from my fear of public speaking. And I would say that God impressed on my mind that he had called me, that he had given me a message bigger than me, that I should focus on the message that I was to deliver and not myself. And I knew that when I was afraid, it was because I had this funny Southern accent. I make grammatical mistakes. People were going to laugh at me. I was all focused on me and, how people were going to react to me. But once God said he was the only one that I had to please, all of a sudden I was free. And that's when I started doing media, because back then I saw the racial crisis that we're having today. Mm-hmm. And so I had this conversion experience, 1999, 2000. I was working on a book that shifted form, and I published the book, The New White Nationalism in America, Its Challenge to Integration. And in that book, I warned about this moment that we're living in right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how I fit, other than I know that I have a platform, I have a voice, and that we are moving in the wrong direction when it comes to race relations, when it comes to honoring our Constitution and our foundations. We are totally moving in the wrong direction. And I want to see more people rise up just for values and principles. We know values and principles. We know right from wrong. And we need to stop being cowardly, because the future, not just our future, but the future of our grandchildren and our children depends on us having enough courage to speak up now.
I 100% agree with you, and I love your voice, Dr. Carol Swain. Never stop talking. Tell us a little bit more about your Christian conversion you've referenced a few times.
It was dramatic, but then if I look back over my life and like anyone that's listening to this podcast that doesn't understand spirituality or conversions, it won't make sense to them. I've always been an outsider, and I guess I'm still an outsider. So I've never felt that I fit in my home as a child or any place I've been. Until now, I'm at a place in my life where I'm good, with myself and where I am. I feel like I can sort of fit, but I will never be a part of the system. Like there's some ways I can't fit in, but 1994 was when I got tenure from Princeton, and that was something that I just really wanted. I was obsessed about getting early tenure and showing people what I could do. And once I got it, I was so disillusioned. And I was making more money than I had ever earned in my life. I'd won 3 national prizes, and I was miserable. And my search for meaning took me through New Age and Eastern religions, and I just kept seeking. And I had an experience in a medical hospital where I felt like my life was played in front of me with the narrator showing me different points of my life and the choices I made. And the experience ended with me being asked to choose. And I knew enough about Christianity and Christ to choose Christ. But I thought I was dying, because I'd always heard that before you die, your life plays in front of you. And I could not understand how it could be that you could have that experience and not die. And so that was very confusing. But there was a Black Pentecostal chaplain at the Princeton Hospital, which is he's out of place in Princeton. There was a very elite, affluent community, still is, but more so back then. And he talked to me about Christ, and a cleaning lady gave me a book about Christ. They arranged for me to get baptized, and I got baptized, but I didn't understand Christianity. I just blended New Age Christianity and Eastern stuff together, and I came up with the Swain religion. And it took me another 2 years before I was at the point that I understood what it meant to follow Christ and what it meant to die to self. And I felt like God sort of took me backwards and showed me where he was, all the different points in my life, that he had always been there. And so that was 1999, 2000, when I became a devout believer. And I have walked as a believer ever since.
As a woman of faith myself, I am so happy for your journey. And on that note, let's take a break. Coming up in the second part of my discussion with Dr. Carol Swain, Carol shares her thoughts on how leaders can build culture and treat their employees.
You're the leader. You need to convey to your employees and to your executives who the organization is, what you believe, and make sure that you're setting the right tone for everyone that is looking to you for leadership.
This has been Dare to Care in the Workplace. To connect with Kathleen, go to KathleenQuinnBotaw.com. Kathleen's book, Dare to Care, is available wherever books are sold. Dare to Care in the Workplace is a production of Forbes Books.